Our humble prostrations to Pujya Swami Chinmayanandaji, humble prostrations to Swami Brahmanandaji, humble prostrations to Swami Aparajitanandaji. Also, my namaskaram to our study group Guru Anupamaji, and welcome to all our study group members. Swamiji has spoken to us earlier. I think none of us need a formal introduction about Swamiji, especially for Chinmaya members. People listen to Swamiji's talks all over the world. In a way, pandemic gave us more opportunities to listen to his talks through YouTube and other media. We are extremely blessed to have you here with us today, Swamiji. Thank you so much for agreeing to guide us in our spiritual journey. Let us start with our prayer. Om. Sahana vavatu sahanau bhunaktu sahaviryam karavavahai tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Today, Swamiji will talk us the technique of self-enquiry. Over to you, Swamiji.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Is the audio clear?
Yes.
Yes, Swamiji, it's clear. Can hear you.
Yes. Yes. Antaryascha bahirvidhutatimiram Jyotirmayam Shashvatam Sthanam Prapya Virajate Vinamatam Ajnanamunmulayan Pashyan Vishwamapidamullasatiyo Vishwasya Pare Paraha Tasmai Shri Ramanaya Loka Gurave Shokasya Hantre Namaha. Tasmai Shri Ramanaya Loka Gurave Shokasya Hantre Namaha. Before starting this class, our humble prostrations to Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi, who has given us this technique of self-enquiry, mainly through the text of Upadesha Sara. So this talk is mainly based on the text Upadesha Saram, because in this text, Bhagavan has given this technique of self-enquiry in detail. We are all study group members, so therefore we know all of us, we are striving for happiness, uninterrupted happiness, unlimited happiness, unconditional happiness. This is the goal, not only of human beings, but all beings, whether it is plants, animals, birds, insects. We are all striving for that happiness. So what is happiness? So as human beings, when we analyze our experience, we find when our analysis is very superficial, we find that we are happy when the environment around us is conducive. In a superficial analysis, we find this. When I get what I desire, I am happy. So what do you mean by conducive environment? There are so many needs and demands of this body. So when I find my needs and demands of my body, my mind, my intellect getting fulfilled, I say that is a conducive environment. So I need food. So when I get food, I say that's a conducive environment. I need shelter, I need clothing, I need love, I need respect. So when I find myself in a conducive environment, I am happy. So therefore, on a superficial analysis, I conclude that a conducive environment is happiness. I define happiness as what? As a conducive environment. An environment where all my desires are fulfilled. So naturally, what will be the direction of my striving? The direction of my striving will be to create a conducive environment around me. So what should I do for that? I will have to work hard. So to gain wealth, name, fame, power, position, I find that when I get all these things, I am happy. Greater these things, greater I am happy, more I am happy. So therefore, all my effort will be to get all these things and create a conducive environment around me. So such a person who has this philosophy that a conducive environment is happiness, what will you do? His action will be to create that conducive environment around him, to create such a world around him, and for that you will have to work hard. Such a person becomes a karma kandi. Karma kanda is meant for such people who have this philosophy that a conducive environment is a source of happiness. Such a person will become a workaholic person. You will rarely find him on the meditation seat. Because according to him, meditation has no purpose. The work has to be done outside, not inside. Outside, the things have to be changed. An environment has to be created. So his work will be outside. If at all you find him meditating, it is only to make himself efficient so that he can work in the world outside. Because meditation will make you more efficient. And when you become more efficient, your work will gather a new glow. And with such work, you can create a better world. That is the only purpose for which he will meditate. And that is the only purpose for which he will read even the scriptural texts like Bhagavad Gita, etc. What is the purpose of Bhagavad Gita for him? Bhagavad Gita contains a lot of secrets of management. Money management, this management, that management. So a book containing guidelines of so many managements is Bhagavad Gita for him. This is where everyone has to start. In fact, in the world, if you see, 99% of the people will belong to this category. They are workaholics. They know the value of work. They know the value of creating a conducive environment. They know the value because it is their direct experience that a conducive environment gives us happiness. Majority of the people, they belong to this category. But as we slowly evolve, as we slowly become more and more mature, as our ability to think deeper and deeper, that ability grows. As we analyze our life's experience more and more, then we come to the next stage of evolution where we see that no doubt a conducive environment is a source of happiness, but unfortunately, you can never create a 100% conducive environment. It is not possible. I want success always, but it is not possible to get success all the time in this world. I want respect always, but it is not possible to get respect from everyone. So therefore, 100% conducive environment is not possible. This limitation of the world we come to know. So then what does this person do? He starts thinking about, how can I be happy even in an unconducive environment? Is it possible? Is there a scope by which even in an unconducive environment, I can be happy? So then he goes deeper and deeper within, and he finds that yes, there is a possibility. What is the possibility? If I can adjust my state of mind, if I can make my mind peaceful, then even in an unconducive environment, I can be happy. He finds this relationship. Happiness has something more to do with the mind than with the external environment. If my mind is peaceful and cheerful, if the thoughts are positive in my mind, then I find I'm happy even in an unconducive environment. Now, this is the next stage of progress. So what will such a person do when he finds that there is a direct connection between happiness and his state of mind? Such a person, his focus will not be more upon the external environment. His focus will be more upon his own mind. External environment, to some extent, I am helpless. It's a choiceless situation, but the state of my mind I can decide, because I can choose my thoughts. I can have positive thoughts, and thus I can experience happiness even though external environment may not be in my control. So what will be the direction in which he will put forth effort? His effort will be in cultivating positive thoughts, adjusting thoughts in his mind, training to think positive. So such a person is no more a karmakandi, now he becomes an upasaka. This is the term used in our scriptures. Upasaka. Upasaka means what? The one who is paying attention to his mind. He's working on his mind in order to be happy. So this is the next stage. It's a very great leap, really speaking. Such a person working on the mind means what? Working on oneself. More and more such a person will spend on meditation, on self-analysis, etc. He has more and more time because he knows the real source of happiness is this. So this is the second category of people. Now comes the third category of people who are much more advanced, who have been upasaka for very many years, who have analyzed the nature of the mind for a long time. They have become very subtle, very sharp, very evolved, matured. There is a lot of chitta shuddhi and chitta ekagrata because they have worked on their mind for a long time. So they are able to analyze the nature of the mind at a great depth. Now, what do they conclude after long years of study about the mind? What is their conclusion? What is their analysis? They come to this conclusion that mind can never have 100% purity. Though we say that a healthy mind is a happy mind, but is it possible to have 100% healthy mind? 100% positive mind? 100% pure mind? Is it possible? The unanimous conclusion of the sadhakas are, it is not possible. Just like we cannot make this body 100% pure or 100% healthy, in the same way, the mind which is born out of the infinite births of samskaras of the past, that mind can never be made 100% pure. So what does it mean? If the mind cannot be made 100% pure or healthy, it means I can never gain 100% happiness. Even the scriptures, they agree to this statement. They say it is not possible to make the mind sattvic all the time. Rajas will come, tamas will come, even in a jnani it will come. So say the scriptures, so says Bhagavad Gita. So all the time making the mind sattvic, it is not possible. And we see it also, that in the world so many tragedies happen, calamities happen. And what happens when we expose our mind to such tragedies and calamities? Our mind is disturbed. So it is not possible to escape disturbance when we are living in this world. In such a situation, how is it possible to gain unlimited, uninterrupted, unconditional happiness? So this sadhaka is stuck here. So then what happens? It is at this time, Bhagavan, out of his grace, he guides such a sadhaka through the scriptures, through the gurus. And what is the guidance given? Oh my dear child, the mistake you are making is you think you are the mind. You think you are the mind. You are not the mind. You are not the mind. You are only the observer of the mind. You are only a witness of your mind. You have made this wrong conclusion. When the mind is happy, you are happy. When the mind is miserable, you are miserable. Therefore, I am the mind. This conclusion is wrong. It is not the right conclusion. The reality is you are only a witness of your mind. Now, this piece of information is very, 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 very important information. It's a very important piece of instruction given by the scriptures. How is it important? Now, what happens when this instruction is put into practice by a seeker? He tries to witness the mind. He tries to observe the mind. Mind is nothing but flow of thoughts. So observing the mind is nothing but observing the thoughts. Now, what does he find out when he starts observing the thoughts? A great secret is revealed in front of him. He comes to know that whenever I become one with the thoughts, whenever I identify with my thoughts, whenever I show interest in my thoughts, whenever I entertain the thoughts multiply. He finds a relationship between his attitude and the nature of the thoughts. There is a relationship. He finds it out. What does he find? Whenever I am identified with my thoughts, the thoughts multiply. And whenever I witness my thoughts, the thoughts die. This is the great revelation that happens at the seat of meditation. Now, what does it mean? It describes everything. Why is it that I am in this world, in this body, in this environment, going through so many experiences? Why is it? The mistake I have committed is I entertain thoughts. What happens when I entertain thoughts? Thoughts multiply. What happens when the thoughts multiply? Multiplied thoughts will have tremendous momentum, and thoughts with momentum will force me to act. Karma is unavoidable when the thought momentum is intense. How did the thought momentum gain its momentum? Because of my constant entertaining thoughts. So constantly entertaining thoughts makes the momentum of the thoughts to intensify. And that intense momentum of the thoughts force me to act. I perform karma, and every karma has to end up in karma phala. And what is karma phala? Karma phala comes in front of us in the form of this body, in the form of the world around, in the form of experiences, in the form of all kinds of bhogas. They are all nothing but karma phala. So how did this karma phala come into existence? How did this creation around me come into existence? The mistake I did is I entertained thoughts. I identified myself with the thoughts. I became one with the thoughts. I started showing interest in my thoughts. They're all same thing, whatever I have repeated. So if I have to put an end to all this creation, what should I do? I should do something opposite. And what is that something opposite? Instead of identifying with my thoughts, what should I do? I should witness my thoughts. I should no longer show interest in my thoughts. I should just watch my thoughts. This is the technique given by the scriptures. Pratibodha viditam matam amrutatvam ivindate. What is the result? Amrutatvam. Immortality is the result if you can do this. Watching your mind. What happens when you watch the mind? You are no more interested in the mind. The law is the moment you watch your mind, the moment you witness your thoughts, the thoughts will have to die. Death of the thoughts means death of the mind. Manonasha. So that is why Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi says, Manasam tu kim margane krite naiva manasam marga arjava. This is marga arjava, straightforward method. What is it? Manasam tu kim. What is this mind? Inquire. What do you mean inquire the mind? Inquire into the mind means watch the mind. Manasam tu kim. What is this mind? You just watch it impartially, without getting involved, without participating in it, just as a mute witness. Then what happens? Naiva manasam, the mind disappears. The mind disappears. Wonder of wonders. And what happens when the mind disappears? Bhava shunya sad bhava susthiti bhavana balad bhakti ruttama. What is the state when the mind disappears? Bhava shunya. Your mind is free from any kind of thoughts. Sad bhava susthiti. You become firmly established in sat bhava, in the nature of existence. You become firmly established in a state where there are no thoughts, there is only pure existence, unconditional existence, absolute existence, blissful existence. But how to gain it? Bhavana balad. It is only by the strength of meditation. A meditation where you are just watching your mind, witnessing your mind. And Bhagavan says, Bhakti Ruttama, this is the greatest bhakti possible. According to us, bhakti means lot of crying and weeping and lot of stories. No, 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 no. According to Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi, firm abidance in consciousness, witnessing the mind, not getting carried away by the glitz and glamorous appearances of the mind, not getting carried away by the worldly thoughts, not getting attracted by anything other than consciousness. This is the greatest form of devotion. Devotion means love. The moment you are interested in thoughts, understand you are loving the world. The moment you are entertaining thoughts, know for sure you are loving the world. Because thoughts are nothing but worldly thoughts. When you are entertaining thoughts, what are you loving? You are not loving the consciousness which is observing the thoughts. You are loving the world which is bringing worldly thoughts. So when you are loving the world, what does it mean? Your love for God is equally diluted with the love for the world. So Bhagavan says this is Bhakti Uttama, where you are established in consciousness and you are just conscious of the mind without getting carried away by the mind, just watching the mind, showing no interest in the mind. This is the highest form of devotion. And what happens when you exhibit this kind of highest form of devotion? What happens? Naiva manasa, mind disappears. And what happens when the mind disappears? All the projections of the mind also disappear. What is this projection of the mind? The whole world is a projection of the mind. The body is the projection of the mind. So when all the projections disappear, what remains? Bhava shunya, sad bhava susti. There is only pure consciousness, which is sat chit anand. This is called as the state of samadhi. Samadhi is samadhi. The intellect has reached the highest state of reality, where the intellect cannot, waver. That's the meaning samadhi. You are experiencing the ultimate truth. There is no greater truth than that. So therefore, the intellect reaches a state where it can never waver. That is the meaning samadhi. Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi says this is the greatest form of devotion. So the highest form of knowledge itself is the highest form of devotion. Both the paths, the Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga, has to meet at the same point. And what is the point? The point is where the mind just disappears. There is only pure consciousness. There is only Sat, Chit, Ananda, Atma. There is only the experience of I am. So what has to be done for that? Drishyavaritam chittamatmanah chitvadarshanam tattvadarshanam. What has to be done for that? Withdrawing your attention from the mind, from the thoughts, and paying attention to consciousness. This is the technique. Now, someone asked Bhagavan, see, for you it may be very easy witnessing the mind and just saying that mind is an illusion, it doesn't exist. Bhagavan, it may be easy for you, but please give us some more tips so that our meditation also will be easy. So therefore, a very important instruction comes. Bhagavan says, Vrittayastvaham vrittimashritaha vrittayo mano nithyaham manah. Bhagavan says, yes, when you inquire into the mind, mind disappears. That is true. But there is a very important tip which I can give you, which will really help in silencing this mind. What is the important tip? Vrittayaha manaha. What is mind? Mind is nothing but flow of thoughts. Vritti means thoughts. Please understand, whenever I use vritti, you have to understand it as thoughts, because vritti has got so many meanings. In this context, vritti means thoughts. Vrittayaha manaha. Mind is nothing but flow of thoughts. But though there are so many thoughts in the mind, all these thoughts, vrittayaha aham vrittim ashritaha. All the thoughts, they take refuge in aham vritti. Now this is the most important tip. All the thoughts, they exist in I thought. Aham vritti means I thought. I thought. Aham vritti. So before understanding this relationship between aham vritti and the idam vrittis, now we will call other thoughts as idam vritti. Idam means this thought, idam vritti. So all the idam vrittis, they exist in aham vritti. This is what he said. So before understanding this relationship, we will have to know what is aham vritti. What is aham vritti? What is this I thought? This aham vritti is nothing but the notion we have about ourselves in our ignorance. This notion, this understanding that I have about myself is called aham vritti. How did I develop this aham vritti? Again, by analysis, without the guidance of the scriptures. In my superficial analysis, what do I see? I see in others that when a person is born, when the body is born, that person is available for interaction. And when that person's body is gone, that person is no more available for interaction. So what does it mean? That person is that body. So what does it mean? I am nothing but this body. When this body is born, I find myself existing. And from inference, I can conclude, by seeing others, I can conclude that when this body is gone, I am also gone. So therefore, I am this body. Also, I find in myself that I am able to experience everything inside this body. I am not able to experience outside this body. So therefore, within this body, I exist. Isn't it? So therefore, this body is me. This is called a notion. This is called a thought. This is called a self-defining thought. This is aham vritti. Self-defining thought. I give a definition for myself. So based on this, I say, I am a man, I am a woman, I am a child, I am an old man. These are all the different definitions I give about myself. Then I start comparing myself with others. Then I say, I am tall, I am short, I am dark, I am fair. I compare myself, my BMI with other BMIs, and then I compare. I am dull, I am intelligent, I am sensitive, I am emotional. So many definitions I give. So all the definitions collected together, I have a definition about myself. I have an understanding about myself. I have a notion about myself. This bundle of notion about myself is called aham vritti. Clear? Yes. Now, what does Bhagavan say? Vrittayaha tu aham vrittim ashritaha. All your thoughts in your mind exist in aham vritti. Means what? Now this is a very important tip, because generally what do we do at the seat of meditation? When we are asked to witness the thoughts and silence the thoughts, we try to witness each and every thought. Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi says that is not the way. If you try to witness and silence the thought, you will never succeed, because the thoughts will keep on sprouting. It is like trying to destroy a tree by cutting the leaves and cutting the twigs and cutting the branches. That is not the way. Bhagavan says, apply your axe at the root. Because all these leaves and twigs and branches, they are existing in the root. If you can cut the root, the matter will be over. So instead of paying attention to so many idam vritti means all the other indirect thoughts, not directly connected to aham vritti. It's called idam vritti. All the thoughts in the mind, they exist in this aham vritti. So where should you start paying attention to? Start paying attention to the aham vritti. Now a question may come, why is it that all the thoughts are connected to aham vritti? How can you make such a relationship that all the thoughts depend on aham vritti? This point has to be understood. The moment aham vritti arises in my mind, what does it mean? It means I am defining myself as the body, right? I am defining myself as the limited, imperfect body. Now, what is my natural desire? My natural desire will be Sat Chit Anand. I want to exist forever, Sat. I want to know everything, Chit. I want happiness forever and ever, Anand. I want to be secure, I want to be peaceful, I want to be happy. This is my natural desire. Now, once I define myself to be the body, what will I try to do? I will try to fulfill my desire through the body. Isn't it? Remember, Satchidananda is not the nature of the body, but I am trying to experience Satchidananda through the body. So it is an unnatural way of experiencing Satchidananda. So wherever there is unnatural way, there will be effort involved. And this effort expresses as mind's chattering. Mind becomes busy trying to gain Satchidananda through the body. This mind's becoming busy is called thoughts in the mind. Are you able to understand? How can I get happiness? Where will I get happiness? Whom should I approach to get happiness? What are the things which will get happiness? Will I get it or not? So anxiety is there, worry is there, wool gathering is there, daydreaming is there, planning is there, thinking is there, imagining is there. All these things are nothing but different kinds of thoughts. Why are these thoughts coming? These thoughts are coming because I want to gain happiness. The mind wants to gain happiness through the body. It's an unnatural process. That happiness has to come from the outer world. So therefore, a lot of planning has to be done. So therefore, the mind becomes constantly busy chattering. The moment you define yourself as aham vritti, that very same moment, mind starts chattering. You cannot stop that chattering of the mind. Out of your will force, willpower, you may for some time silence the mind at the seat of meditation. But the moment you finish meditation, get up, the mind again starts chattering. Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi says this is not the way. Temporary quietude of the mind is not the way. Manolaya is not the way. Manonasha is the way. Distraction of the mind is the way. Not temporary suppression of the mind. So how to destroy the mind? There is only one way. What is the cause of mental chattering? The cause of mental chattering is aham vritti. So therefore, destroy this aham vritti first. How can you destroy aham vritti? Aham vritti is an understanding. Please know. What is aham vritti? It's an understanding. Understanding about what? It's an understanding about myself. So aham vritti can be destroyed only by the right understanding about myself. What is the right understanding about myself? Satchidananda, I am not the BMI. So what happens when I know that I am Satchidananda? What happens to thoughts? Thoughts need not be. The purpose of thought is only to get Satchidananda through the body. Once I know that I am already Satchidananda, what happens to the mind? Mind attains its natural grave. Mind becomes silence. Please. Hrutsthale mana swasthata kriya bhakti yoga bodhascha nishchitam. All the path they talk about only one thing. What is it? Hrutsthale manah swasthata. Mind getting absorbed in Hritsthala, in the very core of your being, in yourself. Absorption of the mind in the self, this is the purpose of all the paths, whether it is Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga, whatever yoga. So what happens when you have that right understanding about yourself? Aham vritti is gone, because aham vritti is only a wrong notion about yourself. When you gain the right understanding, aham vritti is gone. What remains is only pure aham. The nature of pure aham is Satchidananda. So what happens to your desire? All the desires are met there. Whatever you need, you have got it. And once you have got it, what happens to the mind? Mind is no more needed for you. You don't need thoughts, because you don't have to plan anything, everything is already attained. Such a mind becomes a silent mind, a quiet mind, a no mind. So all my thoughts in the mind, it is connected to what? It is existing in aham vritti, this wrong notion. So if I have to put an end to the mind, what should I do? I should put an end to aham vritti. Now the question is, how to put an end to aham vritti? How can I do that? The answer is again the same. Aham vritti is a vritti. It's a thought. So if you have to destroy a thought, what you should do? Witness it. Technique is the same. Witness. The only way to destroy a thought is by witnessing. And therefore, Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi says, Ahamayam kuto bhavati chinvata aipatatyaham nija vicharanam. Aham ayam kutah bhavati. From where is this aham vritti coming from? Start inquiring. Inquiring means what? Witnessing. Is it possible to witness aham vritti? Of course it is possible, because it's a thought. Any thought can be witnessed. So therefore, aham vritti also can be witnessed. So what happens when you witness aham vritti? Aham ayam kutah bhavati iti chinvatah. I, wonder of wonders. Patati aham, aham patati, it falls. Why it falls? It falls because it's a notion, it's a thought. It has to fall. Bhagavan says, this is nija vicharana. This is self-inquiry. What is self-inquiry? Witnessing and destroying the I thought, the aham vritti, is self-inquiry. Now, a practical tip of how to destroy this aham vritti. What is a practical tip? You can clearly experience aham vritti when you are thrown out of balance during ups and downs of life. That is the time when you clearly see the play of aham vritti. For example, when you are highly elated due to some success, due to some victory, due to some gain, when you are highly elated, immediately get your center and watch it. You can watch the joyful ego in you. Yes or no? You are able to watch it. You are able to witness it. You are able to observe it. That something in you is there who is very much happy. That entity which is very happy, just watch it without getting involved in it. What is the normal thing we do? When the ego in us is happy, we identify with the ego so that we can gain happiness. You cannot gain happiness of the ego without identifying with the ego. So this happiness of the ego becomes a temptation, and you identify with the ego, and then you experience the ego. Now the greatest challenge in front of you is, do you want the happiness of the ego, or do you want to witness the ego? It's a great temptation. If you enjoy the happiness of the ego, there is no other way, you will have to identify with. And every time you identify with the ego, what happens to the ego? Ego becomes strong. Every time you identify with the ego becomes strong. You become a greater samsari. The question is it worth it? Of course, there is a joy in that ego. It has got something from the world. It is elated. Now the question is, do you want to identify with it or do you want to observe it? If you observe that ego, then the witnessing center in you becomes stronger. The ego will become weaker. But the price you have to pay is, if you start observing the ego, you will no more be able to revel in the egoistic pleasures. This is the challenge. Are you able to understand what I'm saying? The temptation is too much. India-Pakistan game is going on and India is winning. You are very happy. Cricket match. Now, if you have to enjoy that moment, there is no other way. You will have to become an Indian. Becoming an Indian means what? Identifying with the body. Because it's the body which is the Indian. So you will have to identify. Now, if you want to enjoy that game, because India is winning, you have no choice but to identify. Remember, identification with the body means strengthening the bondage. Strengthening the samsari in you. Choice is yours. Do you want God or do you want world? Do you want God or do you want the ego? Ego, world, they are all similar. In the same way, during sorrowful moments, the ego is miserable. Now tell me, is it easy or difficult to detach from that ego? You will find that it is easier. Because you don't want to go through the misery. So just to escape from the misery, you are ready to observe that ego, witness that ego. You understand? It is very difficult to disidentify from a joyful ego. It is very easy to detach yourself from a miserable ego. And that is why God gives you suffering when you become a spiritual seeker. What is the spiritual seeker say? Bhagwan, give me moksha. Bhagwan says, fine, if you want moksha, then you will have to suffer. Artha Bhakta, Artharthi Bhakta, Bhagwan gives. Whatever he asks, he gives. But a Jitnyasu Bhakta, Bhagwan has no choice but to give suffering and to create vairagya in him. Because it is only the vairagya which will force this man to drop the ego like a burning ember. Suppose a charcoal, burning charcoal, what will you do? Will you hold on to it or will you drop it? You will drop it, isn't it? So in the same way, Bhagavan will create that ego, a miserable ego. And how can the ego be miserable? Through humiliation, through insult, through disease, through all kinds of painful experiences. So when that ego is miserable, you will do everything to get out of that misery. And the only thing you need to do is to witness, to detach. And you are ready to do it because the misery is so much. A Tivra Mumukshu is compared to a person whose jata has been caught fire. Can you imagine? Now suppose your jata is burning, what will you do? Everything else becomes secondary. The primary priority, the only priority, the urgent priority will be to put off this fire, isn't it? This is the state of mind of a Tivra Mumukshu. That's what the scriptures say. Meaning he is put under extreme misery. So if you are asking for moksha, beware. Moksha means dropping the ego. And dropping the ego will not happen as long as you are very happy and comfortable and you are enjoying all the pleasures of the ego. No, you will not drop that ego. That ego is a very tempting thing. You will not drop it because that joy is very tempting. You want to experience the egoistic joys, and therefore you will be tempted to get identified with it. And every identification is nothing but strengthening the ego. Are you able to follow what I'm saying? So coming back, all the thoughts depend on this ahamvritti. The only way you can destroy this ahamvritti is by witnessing this ahamvritti. And when is it that you can witness this ahamvritti properly? You will find that the ups and downs of life, you can easily see this ahamvritti playing havoc in you. So what you have to do, remain in the center in yourself, that conscious presence, that conscious center, and start watching it. Never be tempted by the egoistic joys. Remain in that center and watch it. Such a center is already there. Don't ignore it. Why are we suffering? Self-ignorance is the cause given for suffering. Self-ignorance means what? You are ignoring the self. It is already there. You are ignoring the center. It is already there. You are getting carried away by that ego. You are jumping into the river and flowing. The scripture says, don't jump into the river. Just stand on the bank and just watch it. That's all what is needed. Remain in that center, that spiritual center in you. So in yourself, you will find two aham. One is the aham vritti, the egoistic I. The other is the supreme I, the supreme self. Supreme self is the witness in you, the consciousness in you. Remain there and watch the play. This is all you have to do. As Mundaka Upanishad says, Dvasuparna sayuja sakhaya samanam vriksham parishasvajate tayoranyaf pippalam swadu atti anashnan anyo abhichakashiti. The two birds perched on the same tree. A bird sitting on the higher branch, another bird sitting on the lower branch. Two birds. What is the one bird doing? It is eating all the fruits of that tree. And the other bird sitting on the top, it is just watching this bird eating. Two birds. So who are these two birds? The egoistic bird is the bird which is eating the fruits, the karma phalas. Some are sweet, some are bitter. And the other bird, the sakshi, it is just watching. Samane vrikshe purusho nimagnaha anishaya shochati mukhyamana jushtam yada pasyatyanyamisham asya mahimanam iti viti shoka. This bird is miserable eating all these fruits. Very helpless. Suffering, miserable. Feeling all kinds of limitations, imperfections. But the moment this bird's attention goes to the other bird, Jushtam yada pashyati anyam. And what is that other bird? Isham, the Lord of the universe. The moment this bird's attention goes to the other bird, Vita Shoka, all sorrows gone. Knowing the glory, Asya Mahimanam, knowing the glory of the other bird, this bird, all the sorrow gone. In the same way, identified with the body, we are miserable, trying to come out of all these limitations, imperfections, miseries. It will never go. But the moment we turn our attention to that consciousness, which is always there, present, paying attention to us all the time, the moment our attention goes towards that supreme presence, the supreme Lord, the witness in us, the witnessing consciousness is in us, what happens? All our misery is gone. Ahaminasha bhajahamahandaya spurati hrutsvayam paramapurnasa. What happens when you start witnessing this ahamvritti? The ahamvritti also dies. And what happens? Ahaminasha bhaji, when this ahamvriti dies, Sfurati Hrit Swayam Paramapurna said, the real I shines forth. Like when the cloud goes away and the sun shines, in the same way, the real I, which is Satchidananda Swarupa, it shines forth in all glory, in all brilliance. Then what happens to the mind? The mind has become silent. Why silent? Because now there is no job for the mind to do. You have got what you need. You needed Satchidananda. You come to know that it is already there in me. I already possess it. I don't have to get it from outside. The purpose of the mind is over. The mind becomes silent in the self. And then Ramana Maharshi says, in the end of Upadesharam, Ahamapetakam nija vibhanakam mahadidam tapo ramanavagiyam. This is the Mahat Tapas. This is the greatest tapas one has to do. What is it? Aham apetakam. This tapas of self-inquiry, where you destroy this aham vritti, this ego, and nija vibhanakam, and allowing the Supreme Self to shine forth in your heart. This is the greatest tapas a person can do. Greatest tapas is not standing on one leg and looking at sun and all that. No. Greatest tapas is not torturing the body. No. Not sleeping, not eating. No, no, no. Mahat idam tapas. What is the greatest tapas? Effacing your ego is the greatest tapas. Allowing the Lord to take charge is the greatest tapas. Allowing your heart to occupy with the Lord and not with the ego, this is the greatest tapas. Aham apetakam nija vibhanakam. Allowing the Lord to consume you completely. This is the greatest tapas. So what happens when the Lord consumes you? Only Lord remains, you don't remain. You vanish. Bhagavan alone remains. Advaita Siddhi happens. This is the greatest tapas. So what is the purpose of self-inquiry? Inquire into the self, destroy the non-self, destroy the wrong notion that you are this ahamvritti, destroy it, and allow the Supreme Self to shine forth. This is the purpose of self-inquiry. And once it is done, Bhagavan says, Krityamastikim swasthitim yatah. What else is there for such a yogi to achieve? He has achieved everything. He has achieved the very purpose of life. This alone will give you the total fulfillment in life. So thus, my talk concludes. Now the stage is for you.
That was a wonderful session, Swamiji. So now, thank you so much. And as always, it is really, like, I don't know how to explain. It was really, really good. Next, we'll move on to Q&A session. I request Srimati Sriranjini to take it over.
Hari Om, Swamiji. There are a lot of questions that have come. I think I will club two questions, one by Vishwajit ji and one was my question. It was about practices, Swamiji. So one question was, can Gayatri Japa, which Vishwajit ji says he does every day as part of Sandhya Vandana practice, be a way to catch the spiritual center, or is it actually detracting him from attaining his goal? So I think that was one question on practice. One more on practices. I wanted to know what practices can we do to remain in the consciousness and remain in the self, because one keeps moving from witnesser to experience doer state constantly.
See, if you see Upadesha Saram, this Manasam to Kim verse has come almost in the middle. Bhagavan did not take it in the beginning. What does it mean? Unless mind is purified, this sadhana cannot be done. What happens if you try to do this sadhana of witnessing without purifying the mind? What happens is aham and aham vritti, they appear to be one. Aham means pure consciousness. Aham vritti means it's a thought. They become one. You are not able to clearly decipher the difference. So at the seat of meditation, at the most you can witness idam vritti, but not aham vritti. This is what happens. You will be able to see so many other thoughts, but you will not be able to witness aham vritti, this I thought. Why? Because I thought has become a part of witness. Who is witnessing? Aham vritti is witnessing idam vritti. This is what will happen if the mind is not purified. So of course, when you sit for meditation, some peace of mind will be there because thoughts have reduced. But remember, aham vritti will never go. Who is the thief? Aham vritti is the thief. And now aham vritti has joined with the police in order to catch the thief. You have understood what will happen? Police is pure consciousness. Aham vritti is a thief. Now aham vritti has clubbed together with police. And now together they are going to catch the thief. Will you get the thief? Never. The point is this, witnessing will not succeed unless there is chitta shuddhi and chitta ekagrata. Purity of mind and concentration of mind. If this is not there, this sadhana cannot be done. That is why Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi first starts with karma yoga. Ishwararpitam na ichchaya kritam chitta shodhakam mukti sadhakam. See, chitta shodhakam, it will purify the mind and therefore mukti sadhakam. Only a pure mind can be used for seeking liberation. So Gayatri Japa helps in purifying the mind. All the other sadhanas helps in purifying the mind. And once the mind is purified, only then you must try to do this sadhana. Is it clear, Vishwajit ji?
Swamiji, thank you very much. That is clear.
Right.
Swamiji, next question is from Malati ji. You spoke about the death of thoughts is the death of mind. Isn't the mind critical in our day-to-day life where it is responsible for taking positive and constructive actions too? If the mind dies, then will we still be able to think and take these positive action without the mind?
See, when I say mind dies, what it means is you come to know the illusory nature of the mind. Please understand. Mind will be there, but you know that it's an illusion. It is exact like seeing the mirage waters. You are seeing it, but just because you are seeing it doesn't mean that you know that it is there. No. At the same time, you know that it is not there. It is just an appearance. Blueness of the sky, you see it, but you know it's an appearance. In the same way, the mind, you see it, you make use of it, but you know it's an appearance. Sunrise and sunset, you know it's an illusion. There is no such sunrise and sunset. You know it, but still you are making use of it, isn't it? In getting up early in the morning, etc. At 5 o'clock, I must get up. All that you are making use of sunrise and sunset, knowing well that sunrise and sunset is an illusion. In the same way, you know that the mind is an illusion, but you make use of the mind while living in this transactional world. Where is Malati Amma? She's there.
Yes, Swamiji.
Is it clear?
Thank you. That is clear. Yes, sir. It's clear. Thank you.
Now we will take one question from a raised hand. I think Anita ji, you had raised your hand. Do you want to ask?
Amma, please switch on your video.
Shanti Amma.
Yes.
I think she's raised her hand by mistake, Sri Ranjini. I have a
Okay. So the next question is by Devdas ji. This question to Swamiji is, as an innocent person, a great Upasaka, when he witnessed there is no mind, for that Upasaka must be another mind to witness no mind. Devdas ji, you are there, you can come off mute and ask or add more to the question.
Thank you. I'm B.D. Kini, is Devdas. Swamiji, I'm very much thankful to your nice answers and videos. I enjoyed that. But one thing, when you say the great Upasaka, Aham Vritti, who was thinking that, other than thinking, he witnesses no mind. When he witnesses no mind, do you mean to say he should have another mind to witness no mind, or how is it? Just, it is a curious question. Don't
Yes.
ignore me.
No. See, witnessing is what knowing, isn't it? Knowing is the nature of consciousness. Knowing is the nature of self. You don't need another mind at all. Knowing is the nature of the self. That's why we call Chit. It is unconditional knowing. It is instrument-free knowing. It is effortless knowing. It is absolute knowing. Knowing is the nature of the self. In fact, the mind is able to know, borrowing the property of the self. Mind by itself has no ability to know. It is just borrowing, exactly like a piece of mirror, borrowing the light from the sun and showing that I have light. Mirror has no light. It is only borrowed light. In the same way, mind has no ability to know. It is only the borrowed knowledge, borrowed ability to know. Borrowed from whom? Borrowed from the self, from the witnessing consciousness. Is it clear, Devdas ji?
Thank you very much, Swamiji. It is very clear. Mind itself is not ours.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Next question is by Chaitanya ji. Why can't a seeker who experiences the Supreme I in meditation remain there? This question is arising because even enlightened beings aren't above karma and prarabdha. So why can't a regular seeker stay there and reap our karmas?
Who is the person?
Chaitanya. Chaitanya ji.
Where is Chaitanya ji? Yes. What is your question?
One second. My question is basically, even Ramana Maharshi had to go through a lot of things with his
Sufferings,
cancer
yes.
and all of that. So I'm assuming that was because of his karma that he had, and he had to go through it in his lifetime.
Yes.
And he was an enlightened being. He knew he was one with himself at that point. So why can't a seeker who experiences that in a meditation, even you said that during meditation one experiences this, but once they open their eyes, the mind gets busy again in the regular world, right? So why doesn't a seeker remain in that state like how Ramana did?
How did Ramana do? He was also living in this world.
Yeah.
He also went through all this. He also was in the transactional world. So in what way Ramana Maharshi was different?
So that was my question.
So how different? See, he was also operating his mind. He was also answering the questions of the seekers. He was also dealing with the world, with the people. Yes, there were moments when he went to Samadhi, but he came down from the Samadhi and he was just interacting with others just like any other seeker. In what way Ramana Maharshi was different?
If you put it like that, yeah. So
clear.
You're saying it's possible for any one of us, but we aren't prepared enough for.
We have to prepare our mind like Bhagwan has prepared his mind. That's all. Law is a law for everyone. Clear? Right.
Next question is again by Malati ji. Swamiji, you mentioned that the entire world is a projection of our mind. In the world today, we come across many problems of terrorism, corruption, poverty, etc. I never wanted all these problems in the world. So, how is it a projection of one's mind?
Where is that, Amma? Malati ji. Ah,
Pranam Swamiji.
yes. You never wanted terrorism, but how is it that I am seeing terrorism? That's your question.
Right.
How do you know you never wanted it?
Because I don't think about that. I mean, that's the only way I could know.
See, the mind has so many layers. Now, for example, let me say one thing. The terrorist, the law of this universe is, if you give pain to others, a time will come when others will give pain to you. Right? Now, in this birth, let us say these terrorists are giving pain to others. In the next birth, the very same terrorist will be at the receiver's end, where they will receive pain from others. You know what that person will say? I never wanted pain from others, but why is it that I am getting pain? You understood?
Yeah. Now it sounds so simple if you put it that way.
Yes. Unknowingly, we are creating our own destiny. There is no,
Okay.
Bhagavan can never make a mistake. Law is perfect here.
Yeah. Thank you, Swamiji.
Right.
Next question is by Satwarajji. He says, in sadhana, should I focus on I am Satchitanand or everything? Physical world is Satchitanand, including my body.
Who is it?
Satwarajji, do you want to add more to the question?
Yeah, Hari Om Swamiji.
Haryo.
Yeah. So my question was like, when we are doing the regular sadhana.
Video, please. Video,
So,
video.
Yeah.
Ha.
Hari Om.
Yes.
Yeah. So my question was like, when I am doing this regular sadhana about like I am a conscious, I am Satchit Anand.
Yes.
So two things are coming. If I am Satchit Anand, I am that energy. So that is one thought. And second thought is, when now what is this all physical world, including my body? So in my regular this Atma Bodha classes and all, so what we understood is like this world is none other than Satchitanand. So everything is Satchitanand. So when we are doing the sadhana, either should I focus on that energy, or should we focus on like everything is Brahman?
Whatever gives you peace of mind, focus on that. Understood? The question is not, because there are thousands of ways in which you can meditate upon God. What is suitable for you, you only have to decide. Because based on your previous samskaras, vasanas, etc., what gives taste to your meditation, that you do.
That focusing on that energy part, okay, I understood that. Whatever the taste, I need to focus on that. But when I come on this physical world part, not on particular object, entire cosmos, right? So sometimes I feel like, okay, everything is Brahman only, you know, like with whom I'm talking, either living, non-living, everything. Right. So in that way also.
Of course you can. You can.
Okay, so two ways.
Yes, yes.
Either this, either that.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Both are acceptable.
Thank you. Thank you, Swamiji.
Right.
Next question is by Archana ji. She said, Swamiji, you said that for a seeker of moksha, there will be misery. isn't this contrary to the equation that doing good karma gives one a good happy life free of miseries and paves the path towards seeking moksha, and bad karma moves one away from the moksha path? Archana ji had asked that question.
Yes. See, the point is this: everybody is miserable. In this world, everybody is miserable. But to the extent your mind becomes sensitive, you experience that misery. You are able to understand?
Yes.
To the extent your mind is sensitive, you will experience misery. A spiritual person is the one whose mind is so sensitive because of his sadhana, because that mind has become so pure that a little pain appears to be a great pain. You understand? A person who has not done any sadhana, worldly person, sensuous person, the mind is so dull and gross, he is also going through pain, but he is not aware that it is pain. A person who is smoking, or a person who is drinking and a drunkard and all, see, they are going through pain, but they are not aware that they are in pain. You understand? A person who is highly sensitive, he will say, my God, this smoke is going to destroy my lungs. I am going to suffer so much. So that very thought itself prevents him from smoking. Whereas another person, he smokes, his dull mind is not able to visualize what is going to come in the future. Are you able to understand what I am saying?
Yes. Yeah.
So as sadhana develops, your mind becomes so concentrated, so pure, so receptive, so sensitive that you are able to see pain even before the pain coming. We all eat junk food, isn't it? You know that your stomach is going to get upset, but even then we eat. Why? We eat because we are not able to see the pain after this pleasure. There is a momentary pleasure, but afterwards there is a permanent pain. We are not able to see the pain. Our dull, gross mind is able to see only the initial pleasure, but not the ultimate, long-lasting pain. But as you progress in sadhana, you start seeing that everything in this world is pain only. Even existing in this body is nothing but pain. There are thousands of limbs in this body, and every limb can cause a disease. Can you believe it? Just go to Google and search disease. My God, it will be a big list. Every inch of our body can have some or the other kind of disease. So in short, living in this body itself is a pain. But are we seeing that way? No. Why? The mind is so dull. We think that existing in this body is a wonderful thing. Coming back to this world is a wonderful thing. And according to us, this world is a wonderful place to enjoy, etc. See how dull, stupid our mind is. But as you do sadhana more and more, the mind becomes pure, subtle, and it is able to see pain and pain alone in this world. That's why Bhagavan says, Dukkhalayam ashashvatam. This world is an abode of sorrow. But are we able to see it that way? So when I say that as you progress in spirituality, there is more and more pain, it is not that more pain comes to you. No, pain is already there. You have become aware of the existing pain. Am I clear?
Yes. Thank you. I just have a follow-up to that.
Huh.
So when you say that we have to do sadhana, do you mean like we set aside some time for it, or is it like at every moment that we encounter, there is a inner inquiry whenever it is applicable?
See, in the beginning, it is better to set aside some time. Because in the beginning, our mind is not capable enough to do sadhana even when you are dealing with the worldly transactions. It's not possible. We get involved so much in the transaction that there is, literally speaking, no spirituality there. It is only worldliness there. That state where even during worldly transaction, you are able to fix the mind upon the Lord, that comes later in an advanced stage. In the beginning, we completely get drowned only. So therefore, it is always better that in the beginning, set aside some time, morning or evening, or morning and evening, for spirituality. Only then we can see the results.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Right.
Swamiji, next question is by Vasudha ji. She
Ah.
says, while in the seat of meditation, tears come without my knowledge. How can I overcome my emotions?
First of all, you have to find out why those tears are coming. Are you thinking of God and the tears are coming? Where is that Amma? Hari Om. Hari Om.
Hari Om, Swamiji.
So first of all, you have to answer my question. Why those tears are coming? Is it because you are miserable in this world, or is it because you are joyful in God? Tears can come for so many reasons. Or is it a spiritual emotion or a worldly emotion? If it is a spiritual emotion, why should you want to stop it? There is nothing wrong in crying in front of God. There is nothing wrong in crying during prayer. In fact, such crying will only wash away the impurities of the mind. So you don't have to stop such crying. Let that crying continue. And you will always find that after crying, there is some relief in the mind. The mind becomes light, isn't it? If the mind is becoming light after prayer, after crying, then don't stop that crying. It is a means to wash the impurities of the mind.
Okay. Hari Om.
Right. Hari Om, Hari Om.
Next question is by Manish ji. He is asking, what is the cause of so much of suffering and how to come out of it? If the rules are set, why it cannot be taught to everyone?
Where is Manish ji?
Yeah, Swamiji, on this, right?
Yeah.
I know it's a very basic question, but I wanted to understand this. As you said, right, we there are a lot fixed set of rules which we have, and if a person follows those, then he will be in a position to get rid of a lot of things and attain things which are which people are seeking for. And presently people do not know, and including a lot of us also, that what to seek for also. So where is the guidance, and how to get near to that, and how people can understand that there is something like this also existing, and where to go for, how to achieve it, all those kind of things, right?
See, it is always there. Guidance is always there. Gurus are always there. Scriptures are always there, but we are not available. We are suffering because we are closed to the light of knowledge. If I am in the dark room, I cannot blame the sun. Sun is shining. There is light outside, but I have kept all my windows and doors closed. Right? Nowadays, you have all kinds of channels in YouTube. All kinds of talks are there. All kinds of things are there. Good things are there, bad things are there. But we are more interested in bad things. We have no time for the good things. Now, how can you blame God or the Guru or the scriptures, etc., for my suffering? I alone am the cause of my suffering. There is light there. I am not allowing the light to enter into my home, to enter into my heart.
You're right. Okay, because we see the suffering with us, with our near and dear ones, with family, even to our relatives or the colleagues, but we do not know what to do.
They suffer, and remember, you will always find majority of the people, they don't like spirituality. They don't like spiritual teaching. They will never attend satsang. They will go for the malls. They will have all kinds of outings. They will spend a lot of money on all that. But for spiritual sessions, they have no time for it. Now, how can you have peace of mind without paying attention to right living?
Right. But in our Indian culture, we had these teachings long back. Somehow we have lost it, and now we are kind of
No. Teachings are
reviving.
ever there. Please understand, teachings are ever there, gurus are ever there, scriptures are ever there, but I have no time for it. It is not that they were not there, therefore I did not get. No.
People have left it. That's what.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It is ever there. It is ever available. Wherever there is a demand, there is a supply. It is a law. If you are demanding spiritual knowledge, you will be supplied with spiritual knowledge. It's a law. But suppose you don't have demand, then even if you are amidst spiritual institutions, you will remain untouched by it. Padma patramiva ambhasa, as the example is given. Like the lotus untouched by water, you will remain untouched by spirituality. You will drown yourself in worldliness. Today, everybody is suffering because they are drowning themselves in worldliness. They are paying no attention to the scriptures, to the teachings. So naturally, the result will be suffering alone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
We have a question from Sri Vidya ji. She's asking, so how do we know we are progressing on reducing this aham vritti, or even is it that our mind is tricking us?
See, the sign of progress in aham, what you call in spirituality, is you become more and more joyful and contented. What is the nature of the self? Self is of Ananda Sarupa, isn't it? So if self is the nature of Ananda Sarupa, the intensity of Ananda in your heart should increase with spiritual progress. There is less of grumbling, of complaining. There is more of contentment. There is more of cheerfulness. Situations are not able to throw you off track, out of your center. Somewhere deep down, you are connected to the divine. You are, you are causelessly happy. You understand? There is no need for a reason to be happy. You are happy. You are just cheerful. Why? Because that is your nature. So these are all the indications that you are progressing in this path beautifully well. And you will always find that your ego is also coming down. When somebody tells some hurting words, you are not hurt. You are not disturbed. So this also is an indication that, the ego, that reaction of the ego is less. So praise doesn't affect you, insult doesn't affect you. To a great extent, you are unaffected by them. Some shock absorber is there in you, which is as though absorbing all shocks from the world and keeping you intact, protected. So this is what happens when you grow in spirituality.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank
Right,
you.
right.
Ranjini, I think there's one last question.
Last
After
question.
that, anything else comes with it.
Anchal is asking how to understand the infinite being finite.
Who is
So
asking?
we are finite. Anchal's phone.
Yes, Amma.
Yes, Hari Om Swamiji.
What is the question?
So my question is, Swamiji, that we are all finite beings, BMI, and we want to know the infinite. So how can we make it possible?
Amma, this statement itself is wrong. You are not finite, you are infinite. Dreaming that you are finite. You are infinite, dreaming that you are finite. You are not finite, trying for the infinite. A finite can never try for the infinite. It's impossible. Because a finite can only put forth finite efforts. With finite efforts, how can you reach infinite? It's impossible. So the entire Vedanta, what it says is, you are already infinite. You don't have to become infinite. You only have to know that you are infinite. You are dreaming that you are finite. Wake up from the dream. Uttishtata, Jagrata is the message.
Okay. Thank you, Swamiji.
Right.
Hari Om, Swamiji, all questions are over in the chat at least. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Swamiji, for clearing all our doubts.
Right.
Feel extremely blessed. We look forward to more such sessions from you.
Right.
Thank you, Sri Ranjini. I request Vishwajit ji to chant the closing prayer.
Hari Om. Om Swasti Prajabhyah Paripalayantam Nyayena Margena Mahishaha Go Brahmanebhyah Shubhamastu Nityam Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Kale Varshatu Parjanyah पृथिवी सस्यशालिनी देशोऽयं क्षोभरहितः ब्राह्मणा सन्तु निर्भयाः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ओम् श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ओम्
Hari Om Swamiji.
Hari Om.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you chose Upadesha Sara. That's the text we are doing in the Belandur class at least. So I'm sure all of them have learned a lot through this thing. Everyone else too, but more so them. I guess they would have appreciated it quite a bit. So thank you, Swamiji.